Welcome, everybody. We thank you for joining us tonight for our Fresh Squeeze Gallery Talk with Karina Yanes and Brittani Brown. My name is Amanda Cooper, and I'm the Chief Curator for the Morian Art Center. And we thank you for your interest in this talk, your interest in these artists and being here tonight. And also thank you to Brittani and Karina for having your amazing work in our gallery during this time. And preparing for the talk tonight. We appreciate it. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Brittani or Karina, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to hear from two of our 6 Fresh Squeezed 8 artists, Brittani and Karina. And first, I want to say a few things in the way of introduction. This is the Morian Art Center, and we are located in beautiful downtown St. Petersburg, Florida. And this is where you can view Fresh Squeeze. The Morian is a community art center that was founded in 1917. So we've been around over 100 years serving the community. Fresh Squeezed is up through June 27th. So if you find yourself in the St. Petersburg, Florida area, we'd love to have you here and see the work in person. I'm going to go through a few slides really quickly of work from the past 7 years of Fresh Squeezed. So we started the Fresh Squeezed exhibition back in 2017 when we were celebrating 100 years of the Morian. One of the things that the Morian does is we love to showcase local artist work. We're usually the place where, I'm sorry, I said local, I meant emerging, but they're mostly local too. The Morian Art Center is usually the place where artists show their work before they go on to museum shows and other things. So we're really proud to be able to be one of the first places an artist shows their work. That's what we're all about. And Fresh Squeezed is a way that we intentionally do that. So it's an exhibition that's open to all emerging artists living in the state of Florida. This is an image from the very first Fresh Squeezed, where one of the artists took the title of the show quite literally. So after 8 years, we've created a little community of artists. We like to try to follow up with them where possible. And we had a 5-year retrospective of the first artist's work back in 2021. If you're interested in seeing all of the artists who have been in Fresh Squeezed in the past, you can go to our website, morianartcenter.org, and under the Fresh Squeezed tab, there's a list of all the artists in the past 7 years of Fresh Squeezed, including their Instagram, so you can see all of their work. And how it works is we put out a call for artists, and it's a statewide show. We usually have around 150 artists enter. This year we had 200 artists enter. It was a record. And we have a jurying process. It's always very difficult. We had to narrow 200 artists down to 6. But it's a great way for us at the Morian to see the scope of work being made in the state. So it's a very exciting time. And in 8 years, we've exhibited artwork from 48 artists from 21 Florida cities, everywhere from Miami to Jacksonville to Pensacola and many cities in between. And if you're interested, if you're an artist listening to this and you're interested in applying for 2025 Fresh Squeeze 9, we usually put out the call in late summer, and the deadline to enter is November. So keep all of that in mind. I'd like to thank our sponsors. We couldn't do what we do without our sponsors. Great community friends, Lisa and Perry Everett, and also the Gobioff Foundation. They are the founding sponsors of the Fresh Squeezed project. And again, if you're a local artist listening to this, you should look into the Gobioff Foundation. They do micro grants of up to $500 for local artists working on projects. So they're a great community resource. So I wanted to talk about, there's 6 artists. We're here, sorry, we will hear from 2 of them tonight, but I just wanted to quickly go through the other 4. Jade Archbold is a mixed media artist from Dade City. Camilla Bird is an oil painter, lives in Pinellas Park. She's currently pursuing her BFA at USF in Tampa. This is Emily Martinez. She's an MFA candidate at USF Tampa. And this, the middle part of this slide, and she lives in St. Pete. And now we're going to hear from our 2 artists of the evening. First, we're going to hear from Brittani Brown. Brittani is an MFA candidate at UCF in Orlando. And this is a image of part of her exhibition here. And then second, we're going to hear from Karina Yanes, who is an MFA candidate at University of Florida. Go Gators. And this is an image of her work. And what we're going to do is hear from both artists back to back. And then if you guys have any questions you want to ask either artist or both artists, just type them in the chat. And then we'll address those questions at the end after both artists have spoken. All right. So, and in the meantime, if you will keep yourselves muted, unless you're one of the artists speaking, and I'll try to just mute everybody. And we will hear from Brittani first.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. Oh my Lord. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. So first, I would like to thank the Marian Art Center for this amazing opportunity to show in the annual Fresh Squeezed exhibition. I've seen so many great artists come through before me. As Amanda said, and my slide here says, I'm Brittani. I consider myself a 2D artist, and soon I'll start my final year of graduate school at the University of Central Florida. The work I've shown in this exhibition is part of my thesis body of work, which tentatively I refer to as Clear as Mud, Insider Perspective of Modern Rural Southern. The artwork Amanda and I curated for this exhibition elevates snapshot photography, alternative photographic processes, and embroidery into art objecthood to create a rare visual narrative of my experiences growing up in Walton County, Florida. My experiences aren't necessarily unique, but they're not often publicly shared or recorded, especially within art history. My goal with this work is to provide both an outlet for my younger self to feel seen and heard in ways I felt like I wasn't at the time, and for that outlet to serve as a representation for equally minimized, forgotten, or lost rural Southern individuals. I grew up in Northwest Florida in a single wide trailer on a red dirt road, 30 minutes from the closest Walmart and 20 minutes from the Alabama border. I went to a K through 12 school and grew up a devout Southern Baptist, baptized when I was 12 years old. I've since turned from religion and in my teenage years tried to shed myself of my Southern identity. I played part-time mom to my siblings, felt a strong sense of isolation from peers and anywhere beyond my community, and took on responsibilities some would say made me grow up faster than I should have. I got questions like, "Are you their mom?" And I got comments like, "You're so mature for your age," all the time. I'm nostalgic for my childhood home, but the nostalgia is tinted with apprehension. A community enveloped in religious ideals, but a church that had food when my house might have been lacking. Government assistance set up to fail several families, but neighbors and friends with extra deer meat and field peas. Secluded in the woods with limited access to other communities, but wild blackberries and a ton of wildlife right in my front yard. I believed with much influence from mainstream media that to be Southern was to be associated with being uneducated, strictly religious, conservative, or racist. While I strongly reject romanticization of the South and the glossing over of its very real problems, I also resist the existing stereotypical dialogue about the South that serves to exacerbate problems. The following quote from Meredith McCarroll in the summer 2016 edition of Southern Cultures Journal captures very well my confliction in having trained myself out of my accent to better fit into academic settings. She writes, as he reads his own poetry, I heard the cadence of my Aunt Betsy. As he addressed his audience, I heard my mom talking. I heard established scholars speak in accents, and it did not change the content of what they were saying. It did not change the power of their intellect. Then I stood up to deliver my paper about the politics of representation in Appalachian film. My G's were intact. My vowels stood up straight. My on was not my own, and I felt a powerful loss of my own voice, my own accent. I often wonder how I might have been impacted as a young artist to see a reflection of myself in the arts. In my body of work, someone might find a representation of themselves they rarely, if ever, see in fine art settings. Outside of Southern communities, others might find similarities between their environments and mine, and hopefully may begin to form understanding of places like those I'm representing. In my childhood house, there was a time we didn't keep up with changing out the puppy pads. I was the oldest, my mom worked 2 jobs, and I always felt like I should have done more. At the same time, we were going to church every Sunday and trying to lead godly lives. I approached this installation, filth next to godliness, thinking about the duality of a filthy environment and a religious environment. Previously, this is how the puppy pad tablecloth I have displayed in the show was set up. Amanda gave me the great opportunity to try out a different method of display where I only showed the puppy pad tablecloth hung up on the wall for this exhibition. The chairs and the table closely resemble the hand-me-downs we had in my house, and the puppy pads with the blue liner were the same we had at home. Tracy Emin's installation, My Bed, was the primary inspiration for this work. Not only is it an intimate domestic environment recreated for a fine art space, but it also comes from a personal place of raw emotion. In an interview with Tate, part of what Emin says about the work is, I looked at the bedroom and couldn't believe what I could see. This absolute mess and decay of my life. And then I saw the bed out of that context of this tiny, tiny bedroom, and I saw it in a big white space. I realized that I had to move the bed and everything into the gallery space. Bringing this experience out of my memory of the trailer into a white wall gallery space came from similar motivations of self-realization and the desire to share and struggle. However, after making this work, I realized I was starting from a point of contempt for where I came from. In the visual arts and in other art forms like film, writing, and music, Southerners are already often characterized through the lens of pity, contempt, and mockery. I decided upon this realization that I wouldn't play into these already existing circles of conversation about the South as it relates to myself. After this decision, though, I found myself at a crossroads. How would I present my experiences without feeding into stereotypical dialogue while still addressing important problems? Wanting to continue work in the medium of embroidery after having used it a little in Filth Next to Godliness, I looked at how I could use materials from my past and present to communicate in a more careful way. In this work, Self-Judgment, I've depicted a rare self-portrait, an original embroidery design, and journal notes from my childhood youth group Bible study sessions. This was my first full embroidery piece, something I wanted to pursue as I felt it called back to the sewing practices of my grandmothers and almost definitely their mothers before them. Self-Judgment kind of catapulted me into the work that I continue to make today. At around the same time I was finishing Self-Judgment, I felt empowered to come back to photography. This was the medium I worked with in undergrad and at the time of my admission to grad school. I was inspired to go back to the last house from my childhood that I still have access to, my maternal grandparents' house. Nana and Pawpaw themselves weren't my primary motivation for these photos, but they were a huge motivation to start with. Not everybody's lucky enough, particularly not from low-income families, to have extended family who supports their artistic pursuits. Just as much as I'm interested in the people who live in my community, and admittedly maybe even more so, I'm interested in the things that they surround themselves with. I've never examined so closely my Nana's house, but I wondered what it might mean to others from similar places to see home settings like this represented in visual art spaces. I had never seen myself looking back at me in the form of a dusty corner of an old rural house, but I was excited to create that opportunity, and here was my chance. Nana's house hasn't always looked like it does now, but it doesn't feel any different than I've always remembered it, and that's what I set out to capture. I would say the prevailing influences in my work is from both of my grandmas. Depicted here are later photographs of my Nana's house, and I consider them a continuation of my earlier series of photographs. I took a lot of these photographs a little secretively. I'm sure she wouldn't want people to see her kitchen in the state that it was in, but it felt so full of love at the time. I don't think she's here now, but when she does watch the recording of this, she'll be seeing some of these photos for the first time. So I just want to say, Nana, I love you, and I'm sorry, but these are beautiful pictures and everybody loves them, I promise. I take particular inspiration from artist and photojournalist Stacy Kranitz. She says of her 2022 series, as it was given to me, this work does not attempt to illustrate a certain type of injustice in the hope of remedying it. Instead, I have come to Appalachia to open up a new kind of narrative, one that examines our understanding of culture and place in a manner that is poised between notions of right and wrong. Kranitz captures a variety of subjects and environments, but rarely are her photographs free of the figure. Although I'm incredibly moved by this series and specifically the statement that supports the work, I take a different approach in the depiction of environment, without the presence of the figure, but not devoid of life. To show personal forms of domesticity without using the figure, I considered how best to present some of my photographs. The first series that came out of this thought process was Home, 5 photographs from the road I grew up on and 1 from the church I grew up in, all imposed on my own personal used washcloths. This series consists of washcloths trimmed to fit and mounted on 10 by 10 inch wood boards, and the photographs are applied to the washcloths via inkjet iron transfer sheets. In this process, I'm thinking about our relationship with domestic memories. For me, home is like one of my white washcloths. On a fundamental level, I understand they were bought, but they've always been around and I don't remember picking them out. They're an inherent part of my life, a lot of lives, and take a significant level of destruction to lose their value. What destroys a washcloth's value, and why do we hang on to such a tattered little thing? In the same thought, how long can you hold on to a memory? How do memories unravel the longer we hold on to them? My washcloths don't outwardly answer these questions, but instead pose them in an effort to encourage viewers to find their own answers. A passage from the book, Each Wild Idea, Writing Photography History, although read much later after making the Home series, helped me think through why I felt compelled to create physical objects out of the photographs I've taken. The way Batchin describes the vernacular photograph's role in culture, which I have a definition for here, highlights the kind of relationship I'm looking to build with my art. He writes, so frequently do vernacular photographies exploit the fact that the photograph is something that can also have volume, opacity, tactility, and a physical presence in the world. I'm creating photographs that can no longer be considered windows into a moment, but capsules containing a memory and feelings that are just out of reach. After the Nana and Pawpaw's House and Home series, I felt something missing from my work. The photographs I was taking felt like a glimpse into someone's house, but I wasn't comfortable with creating just windows anymore. I realized I wanted my viewers to look at my art instead of through it. My handmade stained frames were a start to this, but I wanted to pursue this thought further and push the boundaries of photographic presentation. It's very important to me that I've made the frames for my photos myself. My motivation for this comes from 2 different places. First, for about 2.5 years, I worked in the frame shop of a local art store that unfortunately closed about a year ago to date. But I learned a lot about how galleries, collectors, and individuals like to display and handle work. This empowered me to make my own informed decisions about how and why to present my work and whether or not to include the frame in the perception of an art piece. My second motivation is that my papa, my paternal grandpa, used to craft house decorations and furniture from wood. This left photo is a toolbox he fabricated for me when I was a kid. And on the right are some abstract deer that he actually carved many of over the years, but I added the bows. The inspiration I take from all my grandparents is a close to home way for me to recognize Southern folk art traditions within my academic work. During my annual December trip to see my family in the Panhandle, I set out to take new photos at both my maternal and paternal grandparents' houses, but with different goals. At my paternal grandma's, my Mimi's house, I specifically photographed her handmade quilts with a plan in mind of how to use their patterns. While both of my grandmothers make quilts, my understanding is that my Nana's approach is more utilitarian. She makes quilts to be used, while my Mimi often makes quilts to be displayed at shows and neatly kept. It was important to me to bring quilt patterns into my work, considering my relationship through familial practice and Southern quilting traditions. Southern quilting practices as an art form gained recognition largely in thanks to the Freedom Quilting Bee, the collective of African American craftswomen associated with the quilts of Gee's Bend. Born out of both necessity and artistry and majorly being women's work, quilting in the South served as a means to record family and cultural history. For example, one of the first quilts I remember is the quilt my Nana made for my mom out of the clothes she wore in the hospital when she had me. It's precious and holds a moment in time, but it also has practical use, is mendable, and can be easily shared and passed on. So, born of these photographs, Nana's domestic interiors and Mimi's quilts were the photo quilt series. In the combination and layering of my Nana's house, my Mimi's quilts, and my childhood notes, I explore the relationship between several Southern experiences. Along with these, my wooden frames echo the feeling of domesticity and bring these layered prints back into the space of vernacular photography. It was important to me, although I'd used them in a previous piece, to bring back the childhood notes. To speak on growing up in the South without continuing to discuss the impact of religion is to miss the forest for the trees. In this arrangement, the self-depreciating thoughts of a 14-year-old girl sit unassumingly within images of quilts and home, things traditionally associated with comfort. Focusing on the layering of different Southern aesthetics within one work, I discourage separation between aspects of a culture and instead consider its parts in context to one another. Just to talk about my process a little bit, starting from the top left, this diagram demonstrates the process I use to create these layered photographs. I first start out with the straight photograph of one of the quilts. Then I remove the lightest values of the photograph to make a completely transparent area in the photo. After this, I position the notes in a way that's harmonious with both the quilt pattern and the photo that goes underneath. I reduce the opacity of the quilt pattern to make it a little bit see-through so it doesn't overpower the photo underneath. Then I print the quilt pattern with the notes on a piece of transparent film, and then the photo of my Nana's house on regular photo paper. Put the film on top of the photo paper, put them in my handmade frames, and this creates the final product, several of which are in the show currently. As an extension of this, reaching deeper into religious iconography of my childhood, I began inserting representations of myself in the form of altered precious moments illustrations. Immediately recognizable by their teardrop-shaped eyes, round features, and general cherub-like appearances, not everyone who's familiar with the characters also knows that they're associated with religion. Precious Moments characters were a common decoration one could find in plenty of Southern households in the form of greeting cards, figurines, children's books, and even cross-stitch and embroidery. Sam Butcher took part in creating the Precious Moments illustrations, featuring his signature cartoonish style as a visual aid for Christian teachings. As it was tradition within the churches I grew up in, I became familiar with receiving Bibles during important life events. I was gifted a Precious Moments Bible as my first Bible at 2 years old, and I remember using it for a very long time before I upgraded to my Big Girl Bible. This is where I drew my inspiration for the use of these characters. I grew up with them all around me, and with an aversion to literal self-portraiture, I found this an appropriate approach to inserting myself into the artwork without making it feel too specific to my image. While the majority of my work takes from my childhood experiences and focuses on the less glamorous parts of it, As an adult, a deconstructed Christian, and an artist, it seems that what they say about hindsight is true. I find myself missing parts of home more than I ever thought that I would, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without the experiences that I've had. With the life I've been given, I'm in the incredibly lucky position to represent a community that is often glossed over. With my work, I hope someone will see a reflection of themselves that I never found in art before, and that this representation opens the way to a more rounded understanding of the background I come from, both inside and outside my community. Finally, I'm glad that I'm from where I'm from. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Whoa. Need a hanky. Thank you, Brittany. Now we're going to hear from Karina. Oh, and just a reminder, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the talk.
Great. Okay. Whoop. Uh-oh. Let me get this going. All right. Can you see my screen all right?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Brittany. That was great. Hi, everyone. I'm Karina, and thanks for coming today for our talks. Firstly, I want to thank Amanda and everyone else at the Morian who was involved in Fresh Squeezed for giving me this opportunity. The show looked so great, and it's an honor to be part of it. Tonight, I'm going to give you all some background about my work and talk a bit more about the pieces that are in the Fresh Squeezed show. Uh-oh, okay. My work centers around my Puerto Rican, Palestinian, Midwestern upbringing in Dayton, Ohio. It considers the role that memory and loss play in my cultural identity and sense of belonging. It lives on the edge of celebrating my cultures and the richness of being mixed and the sadness and loneliness that exists around it. My work is a glimpse into an intangible world that I've always known. It's a complex world where fragmented parts of three cultures meet and create a new, totally different and unexpected fourth whole. It lives on the edge of reality and imagination, of fiction and nonfiction, of past and present, comfort and anxiety, of pride and embarrassment. Many of us who are mixed carry this world with us at all times. Each of ours is different, but they all run parallel to one another. For me, it's a world where I can be a kid playing Nintendo 64 as my mom shouts that the pastelón is ready, and a kid playing backgammon slurping on some Kool-Aid. I can drink coquito on Eid and eat maclube at Christmas. It's a world where in one breath, the kid that sits next to me at school can say that my Puerto Rican mom makes the best hummus and that we should kill all the towel heads. Where on a Monday, they teach us that all Palestinians are terrorists, and that Sunday, we invite our Palestinian friends over for Arab breakfast. And at the end of the day, I can climb into bed in my Barbie nightgown or in the Syrian pajamas that my grandma brought me, all while my Titi Linda rubs alcoholado on my feet. My Palestinian identity has always been a complicated aspect of this world. My dad was born in Palestine in 1947, and in 1948, his family was forced to flee their home along with hundreds of thousands of other Palestinians during the Nakba. I lived most of my life hiding the fact that I was Palestinian because, to put it simply, being Palestinian has always been controversial. I began illustrating this world in It's Hard to Tell Where It Came From. In this piece, the elements from each culture are distinct at the top, but as you move down the piece, they begin to blur together, leaving it unclear which part belongs to which culture. These tiles are delicately held together by thread rather than grouted or permanently attached to speak to the way that mixed people pull together bits and pieces of their identities to form one new cohesive identity. I'm drawn to tiles as they have a rich history in all three of my cultures, with losas criollas, which are colorful cement tiles covering the floors of Puerto Rico, the prevalence of tiles with floral and geometric patterns in Palestinian architecture, and the long history of the tile-making industry in Zanesville, Ohio. Architectural elements such as tiles and windows have become an important part of my work. This piece, called 12 Windows, was made by Mona Hatoum in collaboration with Inash, a Lebanese organization founded in 1969 to create employment for Palestinian women in Lebanese refugee camps. 12 embroidered pieces of fabric, or windows, hang in the space. Each window, through its stitches and patterns, represents a key region of Palestine. The panels extend the long-standing tradition of tatriz, Palestinian embroidery, passed from mother to daughter, which today is among the most tangible and enduring facets of Palestinian culture. Doors and windows are barriers that allow information to pass through. On the other side, there's a true source of information, but when it's viewed through a barrier, we perceive it slightly differently. These barriers speak to the way that I see my culture through the lens of my own experience and through these partial barriers that always seem to exist. I can see it, I can feel it, I can experience it, but I can't fully be a part of it. Bienvenidos a Dayton is an entrance, a portal, and a barrier to this blended, intangible world, where Puerto Rican, Palestinian, and Midwestern culture become one. As Gloria Anzaldúa says in the Borderlands La Frontera, in attempting to work out a synthesis, the self has added a third element, which is greater than the sum of its severed parts. That third element is a new consciousness, a mestiza consciousness. And though it's a source of intense pain, its energy comes from continual creative motion that keeps breaking down the unitary aspect of each new paradigm. Oh, we're going back. This door hints at the world, but you can never actually get inside. In reality, this world is intangible. You don't walk inside and find blatant stereotypes from each culture. Bits of them are woven together in everything we do. On the other side of the door, my mom is calling me Nina, and my Grammy is singing La Linda Manita que tiene Karinita. I can feel my grandma's slobbery kisses as she says, Bahebek, I love you, I love you, I love you, in broken English. I can smell my grandpa's cigarette-soaked kumbas, and I can taste the banana popsicles my grandpa and I would eat in the Ohio sun. I can feel the excitement as my dad and I unwrap the box of baklava our friends sent us, and I can hear the giggles as Sasha and I decide which one to try first. I never thought about which culture any of those things came from, because they all came from mine. In Just Like Them, I reflect on the way that my childhood self wished I could be rid of this mixed world and just be like everyone else, be more American. I envied other girls' straight, thin hair, blaming my frizzy hair and thick eyebrows as the visual giveaway that I was Arab. When I wear this headpiece, Palestinian pottery takes the place of my hair, which puts my heritage on display. It's absurd, it's funny, and it's kind of sad. I spent much of my life hiding the fact that I was Palestinian, as it's oftentimes undesirable. Just Like Them flips this narrative, proudly displaying my Palestinian heritage for everyone to see. Jennifer Ling Datchuk, whose work has influenced me for a long time, says, my work has always dealt with identity, with a sense of being in between, an imposter, neither fully Chinese nor Caucasian. I've learned to live with the constant question about my appearance. What are you? I change my response depending on my hair, makeup, clothes, what I'm doing, where I'm at, or what I'm eating, who I am at the moment. I find people are rarely satisfied with my answer. I explore this conflict through my chosen media, porcelain, which nods to my Chinese heritage, but also represents pure white, the white desire I find in both cultures. Bound by these conditions, I stitch together my individual nature, unravel the pressures of conformity, and forever experience pain in search of perfection. As I wore my headpiece around the University of Florida campus, it changed the way I felt, the way I moved, the questions strangers asked me, and my perception of how people viewed me. I simultaneously felt really self-conscious and insecure, and really proud of my weird headdress. And as I went about my day, parts inevitably fell and shattered into even smaller fragments. Hannah Shaban, a Lebanese-American artist, says, the reception and retention of a cultural heritage is a continuous task while formulating the notion of the diasporic self. The creation of cultural identity in the diaspora relies heavily on the past, which traditions crossed the Atlantic, which mentalities survived assimilation into the host society. Her work resonates with me as I imitate and repeat elements from artifacts, motifs, architecture, traditions, and language to hold on to cultural elements and keep them alive in the predominantly white American culture that I'm surrounded by. A couple years ago, I found my grandma's old prayer mat at my parents' house in Ohio during my first year of grad school. It's one of very few artifacts that I have from her. I've been obsessed with it because it feels like a tangible connection to her. My fading memories of her daily prayers when she would visit Ohio become clearer now that I can envision what the mat looked like. I began repeating this pattern in my work as a way of carrying on Palestinian history and our family history. I ended up spending 21 hours of the course of a week on this recreation of my grandma's prayer mat in a similar posture to the one that she would take if she were praying. And I covered the entire thing in slip. The motion of my body was in parallel to the motions that my grandma would make when she prayed. Coming in every morning and getting on the ground to finish this piece, even through the physical pain, made me think of the countless hours that my grandma spent on her prayer mat, every single day, 5 times a day, even in her old age. I expected the piece to break into fragments. However, when I unloaded the kiln, I was shocked to see that it had shattered into countless pieces. This pile of fragments in the kiln left me to question what it means if I create a whole and then it breaks into fragments versus if I create the fragments to begin with without ever creating the initial whole. And does the work carry a different meaning if the piece breaks on accident versus if it breaks on purpose? This recreation of the prayer mat was always a metaphor for Palestinian culture and the care that has gone into maintaining our traditions, despite being displaced from our homeland. But after October 7th, it became abundantly clear to me that I couldn't give up on the ceramic fragments and let them sit in a hopeless pile. I remembered artist Berenice Hernandez, who I was taking a course with at the time, saying, "It's like everything around us wants to go to fragments. To put things together is to heal, to fix it, to make it alive, to give it a chance." I had to piece the fragments back together, and I will keep piecing them together again and again until Palestine is free. There will always be parts that are lost, and it's impossible to finish, but as long as I keep piecing it together, I have not given up. I have since installed this piece 4 times, and each time it's been different and it's been ephemeral. Every time, the laborious and careful act of piecing these seemingly worthless fragments back into a whole has been a reminder of the care and labor that goes into maintaining our culture. I know that no matter how many times I piece this prayer mat together, I won't make any tangible difference to the lives of Palestinians in Gaza. But I do know that the least I can do is maintain some semblance of hope that someday, hopefully in my lifetime, Palestine will be free. They can steal our land, kill our people, claim our culture, but we will keep picking up the fragments and piecing them back together. Palestinian culture has survived under occupation for over 76 years because of the resilience and dedication of its people. The weight we carry is a keffiyeh that's made out of 400 handmade ceramic tiles stitched together. The keffiyeh was originally used to shield one's face from sun and dirt, but it has become an iconic symbol of Palestinian identity and solidarity with the Palestinian resistance. When I made this piece, I intended for it to be wearable and to speak to the weight that Palestinians carry simply by being Palestinian. However, in the most recent display of this piece at the Morian, it becomes more hopeful. The keffiyeh, as a symbol of resistance, is overtaking the fencing, causing the fencing or the system that attempts to control it to collapse underneath its weight. And during the opening of Fresh Squeezed, I was surprised and very happy to hear many viewers say that to them, the keffiyeh looked light, like it was ready to take flight at any moment. We never knew much about our family in Palestine, and since almost everyone who could remember has passed away, I figured we never would. But recently, I found old recordings of my grandparents sharing memories of their life in Palestine, which my dad translated for me. Every biara was surrounded by subara, began as a ceramic wall hanging with illustrations that I painted as I listened to those recordings of my grandparents. Initially, I was envisioning the window that my dad used to sit in when they lived in Damascus, Syria, and through that window, the vibrant elements of life on the orange grove in Jaffa come together. However, the piece became a fence and a door. The illustrations on the tiles are spread apart and fragmented, so you can never see the entire story. One side of the piece appears to just be some fencing with paper all over it sticking out of rubble. However, on the other side, you see the vibrant Palestinian life and resistance taking over. During the Nakba, my family lost everything, including a biara, an orange grove, in Beit Dajen, Jaffa, Palestine. All the biarat in Beit Dajen were surrounded by subara, which are cactuses, which acted as shared fences. Subara became a Palestinian symbol of community because the entire village had shared ownership over them. The fencing in this piece references both the Gaza-Israel barrier and the cactus plants that acted as fences. The door exists as an entrance and a barrier, an attempt to keep people out and to lock people in. As my grandparents shared their memories, they said, "This is the story of our life, the story of how we left, the tragedy. We're going to retrieve our memories in this beautiful place. We never thought we would be here." Through sharing their stories, I give just a glimpse into two of countless Palestinian lives. While tragic displacement is a common theme across Palestinian stories, it becomes clear through my grandparents that the suffering they endured was just one aspect of a rich life. Although many stories have been lost to time and will never be complete, piecing together fragments of them keeps them alive. Despite efforts to erase Palestinian life and culture, we resist and we carry on through maintaining generations of shared stories, recipes, and traditions. So in conclusion, my work highlights and questions how we hold on to traditions and stories and how we create our own new iterations through time as cultures live through colonialism, displacement, and diaspora. These cultures are carried on through repetition and daily acts of care, which is reflected in my practice through repetitive, tedious acts and careful craft. My work questions what is lost and what is gained in the mixing of cultures. Parts of it fragment and fade through generations, but the parts that are left adapt and become enriched by other fragments that never seemed like they would fit. These seemingly mismatched parts come together unexpectedly to form a new, unconventional whole that cannot simply be broken down into its initial parts. This new whole points to a future where those of us who are mixed don't feel like we have to choose one or the other. We never feel like we aren't enough. Because as Gloria Anzaldúa says in the Borderlands, La Frontera, en unas pocas centurias, the future will belong to the mestiza. Because the future depends on the breaking down of paradigms. It depends on the straddling of two or more cultures. By creating a new mythos, that is, a change in the way we perceive reality, the way we see ourselves, and the ways we behave, La Mestiza creates a new consciousness. Thank you.